Well, the Black Cultural Center for Nova Scotia is a remarkable organization, and it got its humble beginnings from an organization which is a parent organization known as the Black Cultural Society of Nova Scotia. What was unique about that organization that was established in 1977 was that it was an organization that was put together with the leadership of the late Reverend Dr. William Pearlie Oliver, and bringing leadership and individuals from across the various Black communities in Nova Scotia together with a common goal. The goal being to develop a way to protect, preserve, and promote the important history of people of African descent that made Nova Scotia home. Through much of their work over a several-year period, 5 to 7 years, they came up with the concept of opening a Black Cultural Center. It was in September of 1983 that the Black Cultural Center was opened, and it has been around ever since, and it's been an organization that is a provincially mandated museum that is dedicated to Black culture and heritage. One of the unique things about the Black Cultural Center and the Black Cultural Society is that they were formed as an act of provincial legislation. So not only are they a community-based organization, but they're an organization that's wholly tied into the provincial government of Nova Scotia in protecting and preserving an important part of Nova Scotia's history and Canada's history. Well, the Black Cultural Center, ideally is located in the largest multi-generational Black community. The fact that it's located in the historic Preston Township. Although the center is an organization that is, focused on supporting Black communities across Nova Scotia, and the fact that Nova Scotia has 52 historic Black communities, the facility itself, being located in, the Preston Township in the city central of the province, the capital city of Halifax, it gives us an advantage in the respect that we're able to bring people together, we're able to advocate for people, and over the years, the center has been an advocate for community change, for change in providing the opportunities that happen in community in protecting and preserving our history. A number of things that would be highlights that the center's been involved in is our relationship with Canada Post, for example, in developing the heritage postage stamps that have been going on for over 10 years. We worked hand in hand with the Bank of Canada on the Viola Desmond banknote several years ago. And most recently, we were involved with the Government of Canada in the recognition and honor and national apology to the brave men of the No. 2 Construction Battalion who served valiantly in the First World War and had to face anti-Black racism and were denied the right to serve without being in a segregated unit and serving under harsh conditions and being segregated to not only in their service but being segregated in being marginalized and being treated as less than. So the center's been really an organization that's been an agent of change. It's also been an organization that's been focused on making Black history in Canada and in Nova Scotia something that becomes commonplace, so that history isn't looked at in silos, that we don't look at our history as a country and say, there is Indigenous history, there's Black history, there's Scottish history, there's Acadian history. We can look at it and say it's Canada's history. The story of Richard Preston is a bit of a remarkable story. When you think of the challenges that Richard Preston had to face, it really talks about the resiliency of Blacks that are here in Nova Scotia. Like many Blacks of the time, Reverend Richard Preston was an escaped slave. He was a slave that came to this country for a better life, and he escaped to Nova Scotia to come to find his family because he had heard that his family had been taken to Nova Scotia through one of the migrations, in particular the migration of the Black Loyalists, and he came here seeking and looking for his kinship. And one of the misconceptions that's always out there is that the community of Preston and the Preston Township is named after Richard Preston. That is a misconception because the community already existed. And one of the things that he did was that he went to the community of Preston to seek, his family, his kinship, knowing the fact that, while this is a community that bears the same name as I have, I think, maybe it could be a clue. And the fact that, it was known that this is a community of black settlers. And while he was here in the Preston Township, he was seeking to look for his family, and he found his mother. And that was a life-changing event for him because he found his kinship. It created an opportunity where he was able to feel at ease, feel at home, and he made Nova Scotia home. And through that process, he was a devout Baptist minister, he was a devout Christian, and he developed the idea of blacks in Nova Scotia having their own way to worship, their own way to praise. Reverend Richard Preston founded an organization known as the African United Baptist Association, and that organization still exists today, and it was developed in 1854. And it was developed as an organization to, find a way to create unity between the various black communities in the province that had churches and a form of worship. And that organization, each and every year to this very day, has an annual conference every August, and it's a way to bring people together. And the important part of the organization and the work that Richard Preston did to establish that created a major level of confidence in community. Because, when you think of spirituality in the African Nova Scotian community and the Black Canadian community, it was a form of leadership, a form of education, a form of, civil rights. It played an important role. Before communities had anything else, they had churches. And that became the cornerstone of change in community. Whether it was advocating for rights, whether it was educating each other, or just being able to, do things like preserve history and culture. Here at the Black Cultural Center, for an example, a lot of the records and items that we have here as artifacts came from, church gatherings and church groups that have shared that history. And when you think of the African Nova Scotia community, the fact that a lot of genealogy is done in family Bibles and being able to share that information, the church played a vital role, and we're so thankful to, Reverend Richard Preston for, starting an organization that created that opportunity. And to this date, the African United Baptist Association is the largest Baptist association for black churches across Canada. Well, Portia White is a notable figure here in Nova Scotia. I think that what's so remarkable about Portia White's story is the fact that she broke the color barrier when it came to, opera music, and music that was a music that wasn't, typically something that people of color were involved in. When you look at the fact that for many years, even going back to the decades when we talk about slavery, blacks were seen as entertainers, and they were seen as, basically, in positions where they were basically juking and jiving, where it was an upbeat tempo, it was a form of entertainment. But when it came to the genre of music such as operatic music and classical music, it wasn't something that we were seen as being a part of. It seemed that that was a bit above us. It was a bit serious for us. And the fact that Portia White was able to break that barrier was a remarkable story. And she reached, international heights, being able to perform for the Queen, being able to, be world-renowned in her resolve. And, she had humble beginnings in Toronto, Nova Scotia, and a passionate family that, definitely was probably motivation for her because, in her family, her father was the late Reverend William Andrew White, who was, of course, a force to be reckoned with in being a Baptist minister in many of the churches, including the historic Cornwallis Street Baptist Church, which was known as the Mother Church, which today is now known as New Horizons Baptist Church. And that was, one of the largest churches in the African United Baptist Association. Reverend White was also the honorary captain and chaplain of the famed Number 2 Construction Battalion, and he was a leader in all rights. And so when you think of his leadership and you look at the accomplishments of his daughter, of Portia White, it creates an opportunity for us to see that in Black families that the legacy always continues, that legacy of servitude, that legacy of wanting to do better, that legacy of overcoming adversity and doing great things it's rooted in family. And Portia White is a remarkable example of that type of development in our families in Black Canadian communities across Canada. And of course, when you think of Portia White and her international success, it leaves us to believe that, it was only a matter of time before we as Nova Scotians, as Black Nova Scotians, could have an impact on society. The story of Viola Desmond is a remarkable story. It's a story that really shows the depth of community here in Nova Scotia and the wealth of African Nova Scotia culture and heritage here. The fact that Viola Desmond went into a movie theater in New Glasgow, sat in a whites-only section and was told that she couldn't, and faced a fine for that, went to jail for that, and fought for her rights. When you think of that and the fact that that was a major move when it comes to civil rights, that in itself was years earlier than the most important and well-known Civil Rights Act that was done by Rosa Parks when she refused to sit in the Black section of a bus. So when you think of that, you think of the progression of the history here in Nova Scotia. And Viola Desmond was a remarkable woman. She not only was a civil rights leader, but many weren't aware that she was an entrepreneur, not only in having her own makeup line, which that in itself, in the time frame that was, for her to have her own beauty school and makeup line that she sold and had basically a franchising model that would rival many of the franchising models that are out there today, so that people across the province, people across the country could sell her product, was remarkable. And the fact that she was a woman doing that in those early days of Canadian history was remarkable. And she went on to have a beauty school that, she went, and as a business person, she discovered that there was a need for Black beauty products and Black hair salons and organizations like that to serve the unique needs and the niche market of Black Canadians, Black Nova Scotians. She went abroad to search for information on that and to learn, and she was very successful in learning her craft and discovering more south of the border in the United States with individuals, prominent beauty individuals like Madam C.J. Walker. When you look at that aspect of it, Viola Desmond's story has so many dimensions. It's the dimension of civil rights and what happened at the theater. It's the dimension of the entrepreneurship aspect of it, and then the aspect of mentorship and teaching. The fact that it wasn't something that she just did for herself. She did it to empower community, but to also train others through her beauty school. And years later, the legacy of Viola Desmond continues on. Whether it's the naming of a ferry, whether it's having her on a postage stamp, and most recently being on the number 10, the $10 banknote. When you look at the $10 banknote, that is an incredible achievement. She was the first person of color on a Canadian banknote and the first non-royal person to be on a Canadian banknote. And so when you look at that, that's remarkable. And earlier on, we talked about the fact that the Black Cultural Center for Nova Scotia is an organization that is, working for change. And one of the things that we were so instrumental in is working with the Bank of Canada on the development of the $10 banknote. And so I had the honor and privilege of being the guest speaker at the Bank of Canada when the banknote was released. And I tell you that, it created a sense of belonging. Created a situation where when we look at our communities and we look at the struggle and the adversity that blacks have went through in this country, that at one point with this $10 banknote, we now have something that says we are Canadian, we are part of this country. A lot of the people that you learn about in the walls of the Black Cultural Center, whether it's Richard Preston, whether it's Viola Desmond, Portia White, there's William Hall, there's just so many that could be named, are people that started off with just wanting change, and that they never set out to create change, they just wanted to do better. They just wanted to do better for themselves, for their community, and for our country. And so when you look at that, that tells a remarkable story about the resilience of our communities. When you're here at the Black Cultural Center, those stories come to life. And what is really on the horizon for the Black Cultural Center as we enter into our 40th year of operations, it's all about the fact that we want to continue to tell those stories. We want to make those stories known. And what we hope is that community continues to share their history, share their stories, and make it public, make it known. And so when you look at that, I think that's where we're going. And I think, the fact is that we have a unique history, and we're fortunate at the Black Cultural Center to have a front row seat to the development of that history. And the fact is that in our culture and our heritage of African Canadians, African Nova Scotians, each and every day, new history is being evolved, because there are still firsts that are happening, there are still things that are being discovered, there's still new research that's being done, and the journey will always continue forward.